Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into a crisis that most of the world is not ready to face, and the truth behind it is more shocking than you might expect. The water crisis in Iran is not just about drought. It is about decades of silent damage, broken systems, ignored warnings, and a future that could become even darker if nothing changes. To understand how serious the situation is, we first need to understand how important water has always been to Iran. For thousands of years, Persian civilization survived in one of the driest regions on Earth. Ancient engineers built qanats, underground tunnels that transported water across long distances without evaporation. This system allowed cities, farms, and entire cultures to survive. Water was respected, protected, and treated as a precious resource. But over time, that respect slowly faded as modern pressures began to grow. One of the most shocking truths is how much of Iran's water problem is man-made. While climate change has made droughts worse, the real damage started with massive overuse of water. Dams were built rapidly across major rivers. These dams promised electricity and irrigation, but ended up disrupting natural water flow and drying downstream areas. Underground wells multiplied across the country, many of them illegal. Water was pulled out faster than nature could ever replace it. Iran's groundwater reserves are now in critical danger. These aquifers took thousands of years to form through slow natural processes. In just a few decades, they have been pumped almost dry. Farmers, factories, and cities all competed for this invisible source of survival. The more water disappeared, the deeper the wells were drilled. As the underground water vanished, the land above it began to collapse. This process, called land subsidence, is irreversible. It cracks roads, damages homes, and destroys farmland forever. The disappearance of Lake Urmia is one of the most visible and painful examples of this crisis. Once one of the largest saltwater lakes in the Middle East, it was a thriving ecosystem. Fishing, tourism, and wildlife flourished around it. Today, more than 80% of that lake has dried up. The exposed lake bed turns into toxic salt dust that spreads across nearby cities and farms. People living around the lake report higher rates of illness, destroyed crops, and constant dust storms. A natural wonder has been turned into a health hazard. Another shocking reality is how inefficient water use still is across the country. In many regions, traditional flood irrigation is still common. This method wastes huge amounts of water through evaporation. High water-consuming crops continue to be grown in the driest parts of the country. Instead of adapting agriculture to climate, the country pushed more water into a system that cannot sustain it. The result is a cycle of dependency and collapse. Iran's rivers are also disappearing one by one. The Zayende Rud, once the heart of Isfahan, now remains dry for most of the year. Historic bridges stand over empty channels of dust and cracked earth. The Karan River, another major water source, has been dammed repeatedly and diverted to supply expanding cities and industries. Downstream communities are left with polluted trickles instead of flowing rivers. This has created tension between regions and fueled political conflict. Urban areas across Iran are now feeling the pressure in ways that can no longer be hidden. Water is being rationed in many cities. Houses rely on storage tanks as supply becomes unpredictable. Water cuts happen without warning. People wake up to dry taps. Hospitals, schools, and factories struggle to maintain basic operations. What was once normal convenience has become a daily worry for millions. The shock does not end there. Entire villages are disappearing. As water vanishes, farming becomes impossible. Families that relied on agriculture for generations are forced to leave their land. These climate migrants move toward major cities, hoping to find work and stability. Instead, they face overcrowded housing, unemployment, and rising living costs. This internal migration is reshaping the country silently but aggressively. The environmental damage is massive and often invisible until it is too late. Wetlands that once filtered water and hosted wildlife are shrinking. Forests are weakening because trees cannot find enough moisture in the soil. Soil itself is losing its structure and fertility, turning into dust that easily blows away. Dust storms are no longer rare events. They are becoming seasonal disasters that reduce visibility, damage homes, and spread respiratory diseases. The economic consequences are just as severe. Crop failures increase food prices. Livestock farming declines. Industrial production slows down due to unreliable water supplies. Tourism dies in once famous lake and river destinations. The government spends more money dealing with emergencies and less on long-term solutions. This creates a dangerous feedback loop where short-term survival destroys long-term stability. One of the most uncomfortable truths is that many warnings were ignored for years. Scientists, environmentalists, and even some government advisors warned about overuse of water decades ago. Reports were written, conferences were held, but economic and political priorities pushed water conservation to the background. Projects that brought visible short-term growth were favored over long-term sustainability. Now, the bill for those decisions is being paid in dry rivers and empty wells. Public frustration is growing. Protests about water shortages have increased in frequency and intensity. Farmers protest dried irrigation canals. City dwellers complain about dirty or unavailable drinking water. Regional rivalries intensify as provinces accuse each other of stealing water. Water has moved from being a background resource to one of the most sensitive political issues in the country. There is, however, a side of the story that offers a thin line of hope. Some regions have started to adapt. Illegal wells are being closed in certain areas. More efficient irrigation methods are slowly being introduced. Some industries are beginning to recycle wastewater. Public awareness is growing through education and media. These steps are not yet enough, but they show that the country is not completely asleep to the danger. Technology could play a role in survival. Desalination plants near coastal regions could provide alternative water sources if properly managed. Smart irrigation systems can drastically reduce water waste. Rainwater harvesting and wastewater treatment can increase usable supplies. But these require serious investment, planning, and political will. Iran's water crisis is not just an environmental problem. It is a social, economic, and security issue. When water disappears, everything connected to it begins to break down. Food security weakens, public health declines, social stability is threatened. This is why experts often say future wars will be fought over water, not oil. The psychological effect of this crisis should not be underestimated. Living with constant uncertainty about such a basic necessity changes how people think and behave. Anxiety becomes normal. Trust in systems weakens. A society under water stress is a society under silent pressure every single day. This story is shocking because it shows how fragile our modern world really is. A nation with history, culture, technology, and millions of people can be pushed to the edge by something as simple as a lack of water. Iran is not unique. It is simply one of the most advanced examples of what happens when nature is pushed too far. What makes this even more disturbing is that this crisis is not sudden. It is slow, visible, and measurable. And yet it remains largely ignored by the global community. If this were a sudden explosion or a war, it would fill headlines. But because it is slow and silent, it is overlooked. That is the most shocking truth of all. The future of Iran depends on what happens next. Will serious reforms be implemented? Will water use be controlled? Will climate adaptation become a real priority? Or will the country continue on the path toward complete water collapse? These questions are not just for Iran. They are questions for the world. Each drop of water now matters more than ever. Each policy decision carries more weight. Each choice by farmers, industries, and city residents shapes the path forward. There is still a narrow chance to slow down the collapse, but the window is closing faster than many people realize. The truth about Iran's water crisis is not comfortable. It is not simple. It is not far away. It is real. It is happening now, and it carries lessons for every corner of the planet. Ignoring it will not make it disappear. Learning from it might help prevent the same disaster elsewhere. Thank you for watching and staying with this story. If you found this information important, make sure to stay informed, share awareness, and think differently about how precious water really is. I'll see you in the next video.